Welcome to our channel. We're so glad to have you here. Today, we're diving into a truly unforgettable story that's bound to leave you reflecting on tradition, discipline, and the power of respect. But before we get started, we'd love to hear from you. Let us know where you're watching from in the comments below. It's always great to connect with our amazing community from all around the world. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you won't miss our next special story coming your way tomorrow. Now, let's get into it. A Royal Guard's defiance shocks a U.S. general. You have to see this. General Jack Thornton, a high-ranking U.S. Army officer, arrived at Buckingham Palace already feeling frustrated. Behind schedule and with a defense conference looming in just a few hours, he saw his stop at the palace as an unnecessary detour. The diplomatic motorcade rolled to a smooth stop, its black vehicles gleaming in the crisp autumn sunlight. The air was sharp with the promise of something important, but for Thornton, it was just another interruption. As he stepped out of the vehicle, he cast a critical glance around, already thinking about how he could make this visit as brief as possible. For Thornton, military precision meant efficiency, and efficiency meant action. He had little patience for ceremonial roles like the Queen's Guard, seeing them as outdated and impractical. His military training had ingrained in him the value of action over stillness. As he surveyed the grounds, his gaze landed on Sergeant Chris Williams, a Royal Guard standing motionless at his post, his scarlet uniform a striking contrast to the stonework of Buckingham Palace. To Thornton, this was nothing more than a relic from a bygone era, a waste of training for soldiers who should be ready for real combat. The general's mind raced with thoughts of how he could improve the system, how he could make soldiers more adaptable, more prepared for action. He had led combat operations on 4 continents, served in dangerous zones like Afghanistan, and commanded troops in the field. Standing still for hours on end, that didn't make sense to him. And yet, here was Sergeant Williams, perfectly still and immovable, embodying the very definition of military protocol that Thornton could not understand. With a dismissive gesture, Thornton decided to approach the guard. He walked toward him with purpose, determined to get an answer to his unspoken question. Why waste time with tradition when there was so much more to be done? As he came face to face with Williams, Thornton's words came out sharply. He questioned the guard's discipline, suggesting that true military effectiveness came from action, not from rigid protocol. But Sergeant Williams, without a single movement, remained perfectly still, his focus unwavering. It was this moment that would challenge everything General Thornton thought he knew about military duty, respect, and the value of tradition. What happened next would prove that some lessons in respect have to be learned firsthand. General Jack Thornton's frustration grew as he strode across the perfectly manicured grounds of Buckingham Palace. His mind raced with thoughts of his upcoming defense conference and how this detour felt like a waste of valuable time. As he neared Sergeant Chris Williams, the Royal Guard standing motionless at his post, he couldn't help but scoff. Here stood a soldier, trained for combat, standing still for hours in the name of tradition. To Thornton, it seemed absurd. He was a man of action, his military career defined by quick decisions, efficiency, and results. He had commanded operations in war zones, led men through battle, and never once had he ordered a soldier to stand still when there was work to be done. The idea of a soldier, trained in combat, simply standing guard, doing nothing but observing? It was a waste of talent, a concept that didn't belong in the modern world. As Thornton approached the guard, his steps were deliberate, his gaze focused. He had a point to make. There was no room for unnecessary ceremony in his military philosophy. He paused a few feet from Williams, sizing him up, his voice sharp and commanding. "You know," he began, "in most armies, we measure effectiveness by action, not inaction." He circled the guard, his voice projecting as if addressing a lecture hall, challenging the very concept of military tradition. Sergeant Williams remained perfectly still, his eyes focused forward, unwavering. His posture was immaculate, his stance unyielding. Thornton could feel the tension building, but he wasn't backing down. He leaned in slightly, examining Williams' uniform. "It must feel like a waste of your training," he continued, "standing here, doing nothing while there's a world of real military work to be done." The words hung in the air, sharp and biting. For a moment, the only sound was the faint rustling of the wind. Thornton's eyes flicked over Williams's insignia, recognizing the combat experience it represented. But he didn't care about the ribbons or the history. They didn't change his opinion. In real combat, Thornton said with authority, we don't have time for this kind of rigidity. We adapt, we move, we act. But still, Sergeant Williams did not budge. The silence between them stretched on, thick with unspoken words. Thornton's frustration mounted. This wasn't just about military efficiency anymore. It was about respect. And in his mind, this was disrespect. The general stepped closer, his voice dropping with authority. This is a direct order, soldier, he barked. Salute me now. Each word was a command, precise and unyielding, designed to force the guard into compliance. But what Thornton didn't know was that Sergeant Williams wasn't just following protocol. He was upholding a tradition that went far beyond any military order. The real test was just beginning, and it would soon become clear that Thornton was about to learn a lesson he never expected. Sergeant Chris Williams stood motionless, his gaze locked straight ahead as General Jack Thornton's words echoed across the courtyard. The challenge was clear, the tension undeniable. Thornton's voice was sharp, commanding, filled with the kind of authority that usually made soldiers snap to attention. But not Williams. His eyes never wavered, and his posture remained as rigid as the stone walls of Buckingham Palace itself. For a moment, the world seemed to stop. General Thornton stood just a few feet away, his anger building with every second of silence. He could feel the eyes of onlookers, the subtle tension in the air, the disbelief of the tourists watching as this American general tried to force a salute from a British soldier. Every part of his military mind screamed for a response, a sign of compliance, a gesture of respect. But Williams did not flinch. Thornton, his face flushed with a mix of anger and frustration, leaned in closer, his voice lowering in intensity. You don't understand, do you? He sneered. This isn't just a ceremonial role. It's a command, and you'll respect it. Salute me, now. His words were like fire, each one sharp and designed to break the stoic guard before him. But still, nothing. No movement, no acknowledgement, just stillness. The tension in the air thickened, almost unbearable, as Thornton's eyes bore into Williams, waiting for any sign of obedience. Then it happened. In an instant, Sergeant Williams' gloved hand moved with a precision that was almost mechanical. The movement wasn't aggressive, but it was decisive. With flawless form, Williams reached up and gently removed the general's hand from his shoulder, as if it had never been there. It was a simple gesture, but one that conveyed authority and discipline in a way that words could not. Thornton's breath caught in his throat, the shock of being physically corrected by a subordinate settling in his chest like ice. Sir, Williams' voice was calm, steady, unwavering. Touching a Queen's Guard is forbidden. His tone was matter of fact, every word crisp, the kind of precision that only comes from years of training. The words hit Thornton like a punch to the gut. He had expected obedience, had demanded respect. But what he received was an unflinching commitment to something much bigger than rank or military protocol. The silence hung heavily in the air as General Jack Thornton stood frozen, his hand still hovering in disbelief where Sergeant Chris Williams had removed it from his shoulder. The words, "Touching a Queen's Guard is forbidden," echoed in his mind, each syllable sinking deeper, deeper into his chest. Thornton's pride, his sense of control, cracked under the weight of this realization. He had always prided himself on being in charge, on knowing what it meant to lead, but standing here in front of this unmoving guard, he suddenly felt out of place. Just as the shock began to settle, a voice cut through the tension. It was calm, authoritative, yet there was a softness to it that Thornton hadn't expected. Captain David Edwards, a senior officer with the Queen's Guard, had arrived. His presence was immediate, his bearing impeccable. Without raising his voice, without any sign of hostility, Edwards stepped into the space between Thornton and Williams, offering a quiet but undeniable command that demanded respect. "General Thornton," Captain Edwards began, his voice even but firm, "I believe there's been a misunderstanding." His words were not defensive, but they carried an undeniable weight, a quiet authority that Thornton couldn't ignore. He turned toward Edwards, his military instincts kicking in, sizing up the officer standing before him. Edwards continued, unflinching, his eyes meeting Thornton's with the same unwavering focus that had just made Williams stand motionless under the general's command. Guard Williams was simply following protocol. The Queen's Guard operates under a different command structure, one that places the Crown's authority above any visiting officer's rank. Thornton blinked, taken aback. What do you mean? I'm a senior officer. In my army, when a superior speaks, it's an order. You salute. It's that simple. Edward's gaze softened slightly, but his tone remained firm. It's not about simple hierarchy, General. It's about loyalty. The Queen's Guard swears an oath to the Crown, not to military rank. Their duty is to the monarchy first and foremost. No matter who is standing in front of them, they are bound by tradition, one that goes far beyond military structure. Thornton listened, but his mind was spinning. This wasn't just about an American general giving orders. It was about something deeper, something more profound. He had always valued adaptability, the flexibility to change when the situation demanded it. But here, he was confronted with a system that valued consistency, discipline, and tradition. And for the first time in his career, Thornton wasn't sure what to think. As Captain Edwards explained further, General Jack Thornton stood in stunned silence, his mind still processing what had just happened. The words spoken by Captain David Edwards lingered in the air, reverberating with an authority that he couldn't shake. His entire worldview, one built on action, command, and rank, had just collided with something far deeper, something he hadn't fully grasped until now. The realization hit him slowly, like a stone sinking into the depths of water. His military training had always emphasized adaptability, efficiency, and direct responses. But here, standing in the courtyard of Buckingham Palace, he had been forced to confront a tradition that demanded respect, not through orders, but through unwavering discipline and loyalty. As Captain Edwards continued explaining, Thornton's thoughts began to shift. The idea of the Royal Guard's role, rooted not just in ceremonial duties, but in a deeper, unbreakable bond to the monarchy, was something Thornton had never fully understood. It wasn't about the rigidity of the protocol. It was about an oath sworn to the Crown, a dedication that went beyond any single military rank, beyond any one officer's orders. The Guard's loyalty was to something greater, something eternal. Thornton's military career had been built on rank, authority, and the expectation that obedience followed naturally from those who answered to him. He had always believed that soldiers, regardless of the uniform, should be ready to respond when called upon. But here, in this moment, he realized that there was more to leadership than simply commanding action. There was the deeper responsibility of upholding tradition, understanding the weight of history, and recognizing that respect wasn't always earned through power. It could also be earned through restraint, discipline, and loyalty. The words Captain Edwards had spoken were slowly beginning to settle in Thornton's mind. This wasn't just about an American general issuing an order to a British soldier. It was about understanding the delicate balance between tradition and progress, between military rank and the unyielding structure of the monarchy. It was about realizing that some lessons, true lessons, had to be learned firsthand through experience, General Jack Thornton stood in stunned silence, his mind still processing what had just happened. The words spoken by Captain David Edwards lingered in the air, reverberating with an authority that he couldn't shake. His entire worldview, one built on action, command, and rank, had just collided with something far deeper, something he hadn't fully grasped until now. The realization hit him slowly, like a stone sinking into the depths of water. His military training had always emphasized adaptability, efficiency, and direct responses. But here, standing in the courtyard of Buckingham Palace, he had been forced to confront a tradition that demanded respect, not through orders, but through unwavering discipline and loyalty. As Captain Edwards continued explaining, Thornton's thoughts began to shift. The idea of the Royal Guard's role, rooted not just in ceremonial duties, but in a deeper, unbreakable bond to the monarchy, was something Thornton had never fully understood. It wasn't about the rigidity of the protocol. It was about an oath sworn to the Crown, a dedication that went beyond any single military rank, beyond any one officer's orders. The Guard's loyalty was to something greater, something eternal. Thornton's military career had been built on rank authority and the expectation that obedience followed naturally from those who answered to him. He had always believed that soldiers, regardless of the uniform, should be ready to respond when called upon. But here, in this moment, he realized that there was more to leadership than simply commanding action. There was the deeper responsibility of upholding tradition, understanding the weight of history, and recognizing that respect wasn't always earned through power. It could also be earned through restraint, discipline, and loyalty. The words Captain Edwards had spoken were slowly beginning to settle in Thornton's mind. This wasn't just about an American general issuing an order to a British soldier. It was about understanding the delicate balance between tradition and progress, between military rank and the unyielding structure of the monarchy. It was about realizing that some lessons, true lessons, had to be learned firsthand, through experience, through reflection. As the ceremony continued around him, General Thornton stood a little straighter, his eyes no longer filled with the dismissive frustration they had held earlier. He had been forced to confront the true meaning of respect. And though it had come in the most unexpected of ways, he found himself grateful for the lesson. His perspective had shifted, and though it was a hard pill to swallow, he knew it was one that would change the way he viewed military tradition and duty forever. This was no longer just about protocol. It was about understanding the essence of service itself.